Special thanks to today's sponsor, Loot Crate. So I just got this in the mail. It's one of my very own Loot Crate boxes. I asked them specifically for a Marvel Loot Crate box because we're doing a Marvel series right now, so I thought that that would be kind of fitting. Oh, that's cool. I got myself a hat. I'm such a hat guy. Got a little Captain Marvel Return to Home thing. You can put on like a backpack or like some luggage and stuff. Pretty sweat. What is this? Infinity Stone napkin rings. What the heck is a napkin ring? This is so cool. It's the Infinity Stones. Here's a little pin from the Ultimates. There is swag. We have the Avengers 3D comic standee. Captain America, my favorite. I can just put up old 3D Captain America wherever I want. Probably put it in Matt's bedroom. The link to get your own will be in the description, and I'll have it in a pinned comment. Use code Holden15 to get 15% off. You are welcome. They'll send you these. You can do them in different variations. You just want one, they'll send you just one. You can do like over the next couple months, they'll send you some. It's definitely worth checking out. Supporting the sponsors helps supports me as a content creator, and I really appreciate it. But let's get back to the video, everyone. Hello everyone, my name is Holden Hardman. Thank you so much for joining me for another video. I've really been looking forward to this one because I am a huge Spider-Man fan. If you've been on my channel for any amount of time, you know I'm a huge Raimi Spider-Man fanboy. That's why we made sure to have Jeremy here today.
Wasn't gonna miss this one.
And Pastor here today. To kind of help balance me out. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Tom Holland's Spider-Man. I do have some feelings about it that we'll get into at the very end.
I really like the villain. I think they cast it perfectly. It's a Spider-Man movie. I mean, you can't really go wrong with a modern day Spider-Man movie.
This is a really interesting way to like kind of reinterpret the character for a modern era. I think that might be where you and I run into some issues with it, but I am a big fan of this movie. I like what they did, and I'm actually really curious what this guy's gonna think about the kind of new direction that they take him compared to the classic Spider-Man that we see in the Raimi films.
Jeremy, Pastor, and I did some trivia over on his channel. If you want to go check it out, I'll put a little link right up there for you. Are you excited to see Spider-Man?
Yeah, it's not been hyped up at all, so I'm interested to see what happens.
And you guys are already familiar with the MCU Spider-Man. He was in Civil War. You know, he showed up. We kind of had a small introduction to him. I remember you were like, I don't know if I'm going to really care about this kid in Civil War. Are you kind of in that mindset still?
Did I verbalize that?
You did.
He just looked like a character that I was going to be like, bruh, I don't know if I'm going to care about you. I think he's got potential. I think they did the famous line better with him than they did with Raimi's Spider-Man. I do like Raimi's Spider-Man better as of right now, without a doubt. I definitely don't have like this made-up thing in my mind of like, no, I'm not gonna like it. So I'm open-minded.
We're going to have a word from HiTop Films at the very end. If you don't know HiTop Films, he does a lot of video essays. Some of his most notable ones are around the MCU Spider-Man, Raimi Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man. So he's going to have a few words for us as well at the very end. I already know there's going to be a long conversation because I have a lot of feelings about these Spider-Man movies. Here we go, Spider-Man Homecoming.
All
And I heard a rumor. You know who he is?
If I knew who he was, he'd already be dead.
Hi, I'm Captain America. Here to talk to you about one of the most valuable traits a soldier or student can have. Patience.
Just finished Spider-Man Homecoming. For me, and we're gonna get into it in detail here, but for me, ultimately, overview, this is just a really good, feel-good type movie. I really enjoy this movie, but I want to get into some of the nitty-gritty. Jeremy, I want to start with you. I'm mostly curious about your opinion, if you don't mind. What do you think?
You know, I feel like the biggest difference between the Raimi trilogy and the MCU Spider-Man is this kind of like G-shucks earnestness. That Spider-Man from the Raimi trilogy is very like sentimental, nostalgic. I think we use the word for that, where I feel like MCU Spider-Man is really like passing the character off. Like, I don't feel like it might have connected with me in the emotional way the same way that the Raimi movies did, but there's so much like coolness about it. It's really been updated. People sleep on the soundtrack. Who would have ever thought you could make the Vulture a cool character? Like, everybody talks about Spider-Man's rogue gallery, and we've seen a lot of great villains, but Michael Keaton's performance as Adrian Toomes is super great. Like, they make sure that you know he's like a blue-collar, working-class dude, and he's very relatable. And you know what it reminds me of, and I'm not the first person to say this, but like a John Hughes 80s teen comedy. Those are the things that I like and dislike about it. There's a lot of stuff that I'm sure we will get into, but that's kind of my general thoughts on it.
When you said Homecoming is more of like a passing on the torch, it may not be as sentimental as some of the Raimi films, I can accept letting Spider-Man go to the next generation with Tom Holland. He's still not my Spider-Man yet, and we can get into why. I still like him, I still love him. To me, and this is that sentimental aspect, there's just something special about those Raimi films. There's so much heart and soul that were put into those movies, put into Peter Parker, who he is. And this is like a fun, you know, yeah, they had that sentimental moment, especially in the third act, where he's like, okay, I'm Spider-Man, and I can be Spider-Man without needing all the gadgets and stuff. Jenna, I want to know what you thought of Homecoming. When we did the Raimi trilogy, Jenna wasn't with us, so she actually has not seen the Raimi Spider-Man movie. So this will be a fresh, you won't have anything to compare to. So what do you think about Homecoming?
First of all, cardiogram. The bits from Captain America and like the little educational videos, hilarious. Yeah. I really liked that Vulture didn't give up Peter in the prison at the end. I thought that was a really good touch to him being such a bad guy in this movie. And I think he was a good villain. He was relatable, like Jeremy said. He was much more of a human villain.
I think the reason he's such a great villain is because, like, we kind of get it. They destroyed the city, and then Tony Stark and them are like profiting off this, while these are just dudes trying to get by. So it's totally understandable. And there's still a sense of integrity with Keaton's character, because he's like, you saved my daughter, and that's a debt I'll never repay, but if you get in my way, I'm gonna kill you.
I didn't see him being Liz's dad. I didn't see that coming. I should have. It was really obvious once it happened. Everybody's always related in all these movies. Everyone's paths are all intermingled. I haven't seen the Raimi movies, so I can't really have that to compare. I like Tom Holland and his portrayal of this like teenage guy who's got this awesome responsibility, who's trying to do the right thing, but still a 15-year-old who doesn't always make the best like adult decisions. It's not my favorite MCU movie so far though.
Sam Raimi, it's almost like you watch the best interpretation of a classic character, and then you get like, you know, all these other ones that follow. The only con for this movie is that Aunt May was too young. She didn't have much knowledge to pass on as far as just the looks go. She would have to have a lot more dialogue, and I think that that's a very important backbone for Peter, because he does lose Ben.
I think that the whole hot Aunt May thing was just sort of like a fun thing to do. I still love like the wise, motherly figure that Aunt May was to Peter again in the Raimi trilogy. I like the whole I believe there's a hero in all of us speech. You know, nothing against Mariska Hargitay or anything, but it felt kind of gimmicky, honestly. It's like, oh yeah, you know, she's hot, Tony Stark's hitting on Aunt May. That's how it felt to me.
Yeah, it did feel kind of gimmicky.
Did you just say Mariska Hargitay, or did you say?
Yeah, Marissa. I was gonna say.
It's Marissa
Tomei.
Yeah.
Marissa Tomei, not Mariska Hargitay from SVU. Thank you for correcting me.
I corrected Holden. called
You
it
did.
something video and movie related.
That's fine. I'm not always right. I've never claimed to be. What's your next point?
Don't feel bad, Holden. I don't know what either of those names are. It's okay.
I loved that they introduced new characters entirely. I couldn't say this in the intro because it would have given it away, but no traditional Mary Jane, no Harry Osborn immediately. It was kind of like a let's get Peter established and let's introduce these new characters that can stand up for themselves. And Peter actually felt like a high schooler for me. I think that also goes to the styling of it. I don't think Raimi intended for it to be one way or the other.
Do you think that's because of like his level of maturity? He was brought up in a he has an old soul. Like he was brought up with grandparents.
So he couldn't shoot the web without his web shooters?
Yes.
Did he have to invent that?
Let me take you back to a time in 2002 when the first Spider-Man movie for the big screen was coming out. In the comics, Peter Parker built his own web shooters, just like he did in this movie, just like he does in other iterations of Spider-Man. In 2002, the question was, realistically, how would a teenage kid make these web shooters? He just couldn't do it. So they made the creative decision in the Raimi Spider-Man movies to just make them be organic. So he shoots them naturally. It's just a part of his powers. And I remember that was the smart thing to do. They could just focus on the story. They didn't have to worry about trying to answer that question. Later on comes along, we're kind of more used to superhero movies and suspending that part of disbelief. Okay, let's go ahead and have him make them.
What? So how is he like a spider at all if he invents his own web shooters?
His increased strength, his flexibility, stick to walls, spider sense, which we don't really see in Homecoming. One of the reasons I love the MCU is because the fans respond to that. They're like, where the heck is his spider sense? And they make that kind of prominent later.
The Vulture reveal, like the car scene, him methodically revealing to Peter, hey, I know who you are. It doesn't matter who I am, but I know who you are. And that part sticks to me every time I watch
It's my favorite scene in the movie.
Yeah.
It's just
if
so
it
well
wasn't,
done.
dude, if it wasn't for the Iron Man scene of him saying, I bet you're not really here, that would have been my favorite scene. So the Tony Peter talk brings me to that. I love that part a lot.
Now, Matt, I have no idea how you felt about this movie. I saw very little reaction from you when we were watching it together. Maybe you did on playback. And as somebody who watched and liked the Raimi trilogy, I am so curious what you think about this. So, and I know you wrote a lot of notes.
Well, Holden, I gotta tell you, I'm glad you're intrigued. I really am.
I am.
Hey, good to see you guys again. Subscribe to Matt Lane Fitness, by the way. Since you're here, unsubscribe from this channel. It's fine. All right, so obviously Peter is very young in this one. I think they did a really good job at portraying that. Obviously, it was extremely intentional. These are two very different Spider-Mans, obviously. But I was really able to see that. I've heard that from all of y'all. But what I did not want to do is say, here's the Raimi Spider-Man, and it's so great, and it's up here, and it's up here, and this doesn't quite level up. I wanted to truly look at this Spider-Man and be like, what's the good in this, and what's the bad? And there was quite a bit of good. I think it was really cool that they were cleaning up from the last movie. I love that for some reason.
You love like the logistical aspects of once they destroy everything, what happens? Like what does the layman do? Well, they have to do construction and they have to build and people are screwing each other over. Yeah, I like that kind of thing too.
Wow, how are we gonna pay for this building? How are we gonna build this? I have Allstate insurance. What are you talking about?
I got your good hands right here, mother.
I'm so happy that they addressed Spider-Man about to web swing across the water.
Yeah.
I loved it so much. Sucks. And right before they did that, I was just about to speak up in the video and be like, what about, and then they did it, and I was like, thank you so much. They took and put a comedy piece in there with him being like, crap, I have to run. There was a lot of pretty good humor in this, without a doubt. For me, it was kind of difficult to hate this Vulture.
You totally get motivation, you totally get why he does what he does. He's a little strong about it. He's like, I'm gonna kill you if you interfere with my business.
It was fun and it was cute. Yeah. I know that probably hurts somebody out there, but that's not how I mean it. But like, it was cute, especially when you do compare it to the Raimi film. I like the technology that they included in the suit. When I first started seeing it, I was like, wait a minute, I don't know if I like that. But I did like it. I thought it was fun because, again, this is a different angle. As much as I said, like, I don't want to compare it to this hierarchy, that's the only thing that I have to relate it to is the Raimi films. I kept checking myself and realizing, like, no, that's really cool. It did give a lot of different angles. Tony being the mentor just shows you the progression. Tony, good job, bro. It shows you the progression of movie 1. And this makes me want to go back and re-watch the first Iron Man to see the progression and just how far he's come. This one narcissistic asshole has now come all the way to mentoring someone that's gonna help shape and save the world one day. I love it so much. It just, Tony, you just coming. You're firing on all cylinders, bro. This one felt less sentimental. There honestly wasn't a time, y'all know me, I cry at the drop of a hat. There wasn't one time where I was like, oh God. But I don't think that's what they were really going for. You know, like you said, in the third act, they did it a little bit, but yeah.
What about Peter lifting up the building off of
that
him?
was,
Did that get you a little
that
bit?
was maybe the only slightest where he said, come on, Spider-Man. I was like, that's good, that's good. I noticed that there wasn't a lot of Bygone Jim moments in it. Doesn't mean that it's bad, there wasn't that many. There was one, and Holden called it immediately. He said, if you're nothing without this suit, then you shouldn't have it. So true, and that was pretty much the only one in the entire movie. This was obviously much edgier. There was some cussing in it, and like that's one thing that I don't remember in the earlier movies, that there was some cussing and they're dropping some, not like F-bombs, but I don't know, I think it's cool. How do you target that to kids though?
Audiences have changed, they really have. It's not as big a deal to parents. People just seem to care less. I don't know if that's good, I don't know if that's bad, I don't know if that's progress, or it just is what it is.
I think is the new ass. Essentially, is how I chalk it up. It's like at one point.
Love that slogan. It's the new ass.
Yeah, you guys are gonna demonetize me for this video. Okay, great.
I cannot believe that Peter did not join the Avengers. I think it showed a lot of maturity for this 15? And I know that he was like, hey, this is a test, right? But it didn't leave you feeling like he only did it because he thought it was a test. He did it because like that's what was correct. So that shows like a huge character development from the beginning to end. I like that a lot. I did not see that coming when he was like, nah, I think my mouth might have dropped wide open because I just didn't see it coming. It did leave me wondering in the end whenever Scarecrow face Vulture, that's him. I didn't know why he didn't give him up in prison. Was that he's like, no, because he's mine and I'm going after him? Or was it more, I don't want to give him up? I could not tell.
You were nodding yes, that's how you felt. I didn't feel that way. I thought he was more of a integrity thing, like I said earlier. I think that he was just like, he was beaten and he recognized that, but that doesn't mean he's going to vindictively try and go after him. That's how I took it.
I don't think it was a vengeance thing. I think it was more of like it's a pride thing.
From my perspective, he just didn't give him up because he was beaten fair and square, and then he still came back and saved his life and pulled him out of the wreckage and the flames. So I took it as like an integrity move, not like, he's mine, I want to get to him.
So obviously, in a couple of times it's been alluded to, but we don't get Uncle Ben. We don't get the traditional Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy. We don't get the Daily Bugle. We don't get Peter as a photographer. We don't get so many of the quintessential defining things that make Peter Parker the character that many of us know and love. But they did other things like the eye articulation, like low-key setting up tons of villains, which Sony's not always very good at. When you said that you weren't sure about the technology, him being Iron Man Jr., that's not necessarily Spider-Man to me. You know what I mean? And Karen, they use her almost as a sit-in spider sense this time around. She was the one that was almost able to help him navigate these situations in the way that his intuition would if he had the spider sense more manifested.
I think they did it for two reasons. I think they needed somebody to play dialogue off with while he's alone doing some stuff. And I think that they used that to sort of spin the thought bubbles in the comics.
You talking about the little thing that looks like a cloud next to their head?
Yeah. We could go all day on this. I'm gonna link HiTop's video because it really articulates a lot of exactly how I feel. You mentioned the soundtrack. I still think the Raimi soundtrack, Danny Elfman's score, is top tier Spider-Man. However, I love that they did the orchestral version of the Spider-Man theme at the beginning. I love that. I think that that's amazing. This is kind of personal for me with this movie. It's one of the things that sort of ties me to this movie a lot. I went to the theater dressed up as, I had my Spider-Man, outfit on. People were dressed up. It was July 6th, sitting in the theater waiting to watch this for the very first time on my phone browsing, and I found out that Stan Lee's wife passed away earlier that day. So while I was sitting in the theater, finding out that Stan Lee's wife had died right before I'm about to watch a Spider-Man movie. So I always remember that. I was like, oh my God, because it really brought me down while also kind of lifting me up, because it's the first Spider-Man movie we got since, ASM 2. So I love that. We could talk about Uncle Ben not being in there and not being a motivational piece. One thing that really irked me was when Aunt May said, if you see something like that happening, you turn and run the other way. I felt like that totally contradicted the way that the Peter I knew was raised by Uncle Ben. He was very much like, you have an obligation to do those things. That's what he said in Amazing Spider-Man. That if you have a response, just because you can beat him up doesn't mean you should. Like, the reason, I'm getting into it now. The reason Peter Parker is the way he is because of the way Aunt May and Uncle Ben raised him. And when you say things like that, Aunt May, Mariska Tomei, it really bothered me. It bothered me a lot. I was like, that's not how my boy Pete was raised.
Do you think a lot of it stems from the fact that she doesn't know?
Aside from like Raimi films, like comic book wise, I mean, that's just not how Aunt May was. I mean, yeah, she was protective of Peter, and I get that, but
This is 2017. This is 8th place trophies, Holden. This is the life we have right now, so.
I'm tired of the Aunt May disrespect. You guys are getting older. Aunt May should not be a 65-year-old woman. If she's this great aunt, she should, but then again, when your high school kid is 30 years old, you gotta make her look older. Marissa Tomei is like 40-something. I think we are all getting older, and y'all need to stop disrespecting Mariska Tomei or whatever you called her.
Marissa Tomei, excuse me. I keep thinking Mariska Hargitay.
Did you intentionally try to separate the two movies, like I had explained how I did?
I do my best. I'm not gonna lie, sit here and say that I'm not nostalgic or whatever, but I really do my best. When I think of Spider-Man, I think of this guy who, no matter when he does the right thing, there's always a negative consequence, and he chooses to do the right thing anyway. It's a kid who can never make ends meet, and he has to always choose between social responsibilities and and being Spider-Man. I don't feel any of that with him. At least in this movie, I still think that they're grooming this Spider-Man to be, to be Spider-Man later. He's not there yet for me. It feels more like Iron Man Jr., and I know that that's the thing that people talk about online, but that's how I feel about it.
You're 1,000% right about that. And I want to do a little thing. So when we all give our numeric number of how we feel, I want you to also figure out, say, which Spider-Man do you like more? We already know what the hell you're gonna say, Holden.
It's gonna draw some controversy, and you guys have not seen Amazing Spider-Man yet, which we will do after the MCU at some point. I'll do my rating first. I would give Spider-Man Homecoming 7 out of 10. I think it's great. I think it's a good MCU movie. It's a lot of fun. 7 out of 10.
I actually really think 7 is a fair score for this movie. Holden, I think you touched on something that's really important, and that is that Raimi is an auteur filmmaker. This is a part of the MCU that you cannot compare to Danny Elfman's epic superhero scores. There's just nothing quite like it. And when you watch a Raimi film, you know you're watching a Raimi film. I'm at a different place in my life now. It made such a huge impact on me. The Raimi one, when I first saw it, I think I like Tom Holland better as Spider-Man.
All right. That's cool. Pastor, what about you?
You and I have been through a whole heap together.
Pastor, I want you to know, whatever you say, I'm going to respect your answer, but our friendship is on the line. I just want you to know that.
Okay, I'm going to start with the score, because that's the easiest. I would give it an 8, but Vulture was so human and relatable to me. Car scene was so intimidating. So with that, I give it an 8.5. As far as my favorite Spider-Man is Tobey Maguire. My favorite Peter Parker is kind of like a hybrid. If it's Peter Parker when things are intense, his emotions are high, it's Tobey Maguire without question. When it's Peter Parker and things may not be going so crazy, he's a normal person, Tom Holland for me sells it the best because he's young.
All right, I can understand that. Whatever. Jenna, what would you rate this? And I would ask you to compare, but you haven't seen Raimi. So what would you rate this movie?
I'll give it a 7. I was curious what everyone else was gonna say, and the whole time I was like, if I give it a 7, is that gonna piss everyone else off? So I feel safer saying 7 now that Holden gave it a 7.
Last up, Matt, what would you rate this? And who's your favorite Spider-Man? Be careful where you tread.
All things considered, I give this movie a 6.5. I know that feels a little low, but Holden's like, nah, it's good.
No, I understand.
It was good, but I agree with you, Jenna. There are others that I like better, and I like the Raimi Spider-Man better.
I know this video was longer. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. HiTop Films, who we mentioned earlier, I asked him if he would say a couple things in this video, and he agreed to do so. Guys, I really appreciate you watching. We'll catch you in the next video. Thank you so much, Alex, for agreeing to do this.
Hey Holden, thanks for having me. So I'm known as the guy on the internet who despises MCU Spider-Man, but I want to forget all that for a second and just talk about my first experience with Homecoming. When I saw Civil War and Peter showed up, my eyes got watery after The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and after dreaming since I was 8 years old that Spider-Man may finally interact with the characters I have been following since 2008. Seeing him show up and be this dumpster diving kid, this kid who stuck up to Tony freaking Stark as soon as Aunt May came into the picture, the ultimate kid from Queens was just a wonderful, wonderful experience, man. So to say I was very excited for Homecoming would be a bit of an understatement, surprisingly. I saw the earliest show possible. I think it was July 3rd at 7 p.m. I got a Spidey-themed popcorn container. I was ready to go. 2 hours later, and I loved it. Genuinely. It was fresh, funny, and Michael Keaton was and easily is one of the best MCU villains. To me, at the time, Homecoming also had this heart to it that you could feel, especially in the third act, once Peter gets all that tech and all that bullshit and all that help taken away from him. The rubble scene, spectacular. The fact he tries to save Vulture, amazing. And while over time, obviously, my love for Homecoming has faded away, and over time, I started to critique the adaptation element of the movie more and more, I always believed that the Peter we leave this movie with, the Peter who turns down the offer to be an Avenger, the Peter who literally walks away from the Avengers, walks away from the notion he has to impress Tony Stark, walks away from all the fame, wealth, and power he could have in order to be the ultimate protector of the little guy, that Peter would make for a fantastic interpretation of Spider-Man. That Peter is the character I wanted to see going forward, and that Peter is the character I still want to see.